Death of the well-known rock singer Janis Joplin. Miss Joplin was found dead in her bedroom last night. She was 27 years old.
What happens when two of the wildest rock stars of the 1960s clash? Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison were famous for their music and their crazy lifestyles, but behind the scenes, things got dark. Today, we're uncovering the shocking reason why Janis Joplin utterly hated Jim Morrison, and how one broken bottle changed everything between them forever. Get ready to hear the hidden truth they didn't want you to know, revealed at last. The night Janis said, "Enough." Don't think of the night Janis Joplin fought back as just another crazy rock and roll story. It was a turning point that showed the real, raw emotions that were hiding behind the fame. It took place at a party in Hidden Hills, which is just outside of Los Angeles. Compared to the stars who were there, whose lives were probably very crazy, the party felt quiet. A famous music producer named Paul Rothchild worked closely with both Janis and Jim Morrison. He thought he had the right idea. He would bring these two strong rock bands together to make an unforgettable moment. Jim Morrison, the charismatic but unstable Lizard King of the Doors, and Janis Joplin, who had a fierce voice and kept her wild spirit in check. It looked like a meeting that would lead to magic on paper. Things didn't really go magically, though. There was a fight that changed everything. They seemed interested in each other at first. They told stories, laughed, and felt a strong pull towards each other. Janis was interested in Jim because of his wild charm and the mystery that surrounded him. In turn, Jim was pulled to Janis's raw strength and fearlessness. But then the drinks came out, and Jim's dark side came out with them. Everyone knew that Morrison liked to drink a lot, but that night, his charm quickly went sour. Jim started to cross lines as the alcohol made him lose his mind. What began as chatting for fun turned into something uncomfortable and dangerous. Morrison didn't want to follow the rules, even though Janis tried to keep things light. Morrison grabbed Janis's hair when it was clear she wanted to leave. It wasn't a harmless or funny move. It was mean, violent, and frightening. Jim Morrison, the rock star known for his crazy lyrics and exciting shows, showed a darker side that not many people saw. This wasn't the charming lead singer anymore. When he didn't get what he wanted, this man could turn dangerous. Janis had fought her whole life to be seen and valued, so she wasn't going to be anyone's victim, not even his. The only thing close by was a bottle of Southern Comfort, which Janis always brought with her like a safety blanket. She swung it with all her strength right away and hit Morrison in the head with the bottle. The glass broke into many pieces that fell to the floor. Jim fell to the ground, shocked, bleeding, and feeling ashamed. There was a lot more going on than just a fight at that time. Janis made it very clear that she would not be pushed, dominated, or managed. Janis's thoughts about Jim Morrison changed for good after that night. The man who had once interested her briefly turned into someone she hated very much. What could have been a legendary friendship or a creative relationship turned into a painful breakup. The event didn't seem to bother Morrison. He seemed to think of it as just another crazy thing that happened in his crazy life. But for Janis, it was a breach of trust and a breach of safety that she would never forget. This was more than one night. It was the crack that people could see in a much bigger problem. Morrison's violent behavior that night wasn't an isolated event. It was part of a bigger pattern of controlling, manipulating, and hurting the women around him. It showed what a bad place these artists lived, a world where excess and fame often covered up abuse and cruelty. It wasn't just anger that made Janis Joplin respond the way she did. It was an attack on a society that let men like Morrison abuse their power without getting caught. She had fought her whole life to avoid being ignored, made fun of, and shut up. What Morrison did was a clear reminder of the very things she was fighting against. Things that saw women as less than equal and accepted violent behavior as part of the rock star lifestyle. The event at the party was a violent turning point, but it also stood for the meeting of two worlds. Janice showed strong freedom, honest feelings, and a refusal to be anyone but herself. Morrison showed the bad side of rock star fame, the inflated ego, the violent outbursts, and the idea of a troubled genius that made abusive behavior okay. It wasn't just self-defense that made Janice break the bottle. It was a strong choice not to be a victim. This meant that Morrison had no power over her, no matter how famous or charming he was. That single act of defiance made it clear why she would never forgive him, and how strong her hate was. They were both changed by what happened afterward. Janice cut off all ties with Morrison and wouldn't share any space with him. Her friends knew how angry she was. For his part, Morrison kept going down the road that was hurting him, not knowing or not wanting to deal with the results of his actions. The king and the queen of rock had a fight, and only one of them got away with their honor unscathed. Next, we'll talk about the shocking truths about Morrison's darker side, told by the women who knew him best. These stories show that his cruel behavior wasn't just a wild rock and roll excess, but a dangerous reality that he lived with every day. Jim Morrison's dark pattern of abuse. Jim Morrison was a lot more than just a crazy rock star who liked to break the rules. It was true that he was both a poetic genius and an electrifying frontman, but many people close to him have only lately started to talk about it in public. Not only did he act out or party too much, but he also abused others' feelings, hit them, and even sexually abused them. According to Morrison's ex-girlfriends, he was a man who could both fascinate and control and scare people. Judy Huddleston, who dated him for a few years, says that their relationship had a lot of ups and downs. Morrison seemed loving and kind at times, but those feelings were often followed by mean rants and scary fits of rage. He didn't just push the limits, he broke them. She said that Morrison's anger got violent at times, and that he even pushed himself on her even though she didn't want to be touched. This wasn't the careless behavior of a party animal. It was the repeated abuse of someone who thought he had the right to control those around him. Another woman from the 1960s rock scene, Pamela Des Barres, says Morrison hit her without a reason while they were out. Acts like these weren't one-offs. They happened more than once, which shows a pattern rather than a single mistake. John Densmore, Morrison's closest bandmate and drummer, saw Jim's anger get out of hand and act threateningly. One time, he even held a knife up to a woman in a scary show of control. It seems that Morrison had a different side to him than the rock god picture that people had of him. People told stories about him for decades as part of the crazy, exciting life of a rock star, as if breaking the rules and hurting other people were part of being a genius. People let bad behavior slide. These new accounts, on the other hand, show that his violence and manipulation did cause real pain, especially to the women who trusted him. The music scene of the 1960s was a place where crazy behavior was accepted, and abuse, especially from men, was often ignored or given a pass. This is how Morrison's actions should be understood. At that time, men had a lot of advantages. Guys like Morrison got away with bad behavior because of their fame and ability, making them impossible to catch. The story of the tortured artist hid the truth and let bad things keep happening without being stopped. It wasn't just this culture that kept Morrison safe, it also helped make him famous while shutting down the opinions of those he hurt. Many of the women around him and in the music scene had to suffer in quiet or were ignored when they spoke out. The stories that are just now coming out show how much that quiet cost in years of hurt, fear, and betrayal. This picture fits nicely with Janis Joplin's dislike of Morrison. She wasn't just mad at him for what he did to her. She saw Morrison as a symbol of this bad system. He was a symbol of the dangerous male behavior that was made cool and encouraged. Janis fought Morrison because she wanted to fight back against a society that put limits on women and praised bad behavior in men. We thought we knew everything about Morrison until we learnt about how he abused people. It makes us see him not only as a flawed artist, but also as someone who was hurt badly and has scars that will last. Also, it makes Janis's angry response to him even more powerful and easy to understand. Her anger wasn't just a result of personal grudges, it was a reaction to real wrongs and harm. This dark part of Morrison's life is important to know about if you want to understand the dangers and effects that lie beneath the glamour. It helps explain why Janis, a woman who had her own problems with pain and addiction, wouldn't accept or forgive Morrison's actions. She saw clearly what other people didn't. But Morrison's bad behavior wasn't the only thing that was going on with rock and roll, success, and how men and women were treated differently in society. The wild lifestyles and careless behavior were not justifications. They were part of a dangerous atmosphere that pushed people to do bad things and kept victims quiet. Janis didn't just fight one man. She fought a system that let guys like Morrison do bad things without getting caught. We should think again about what we celebrate and who we hold up as heroes after hearing her story. It makes us want to learn more about how fame and power can hide bad things. Next, we'll talk about how Janis's fight against Morrison was also a fight against a bigger culture wrong. The hypocrisy and double standards that shaped their lives and made Janis hate Morrison so much and for so long. Janis versus the system. When Janis Joplin turned down Jim Morrison, she wasn't just fighting a guy. The rules that kept women smaller, quieter, and less powerful were unfair, and she was working against them. Janis always went against the norm, which was hard on her for being brave and true to herself. She wasn't just a crazy singer. She was a woman who didn't want to follow the rules that society set for her. She grew up in a world that didn't like girls who were different from everyone else. She was picked on, turned down, and harshly judged for how she looked, behaved, and even the music she liked. Even though the boys were praised for being rebellious, Janis was made fun of and scolded. It followed her into the music business, where women artists were supposed to be nice, pretty, and quiet. Many people had high hopes for Janis, but her raw voice and wild spirit let them down. It cost her a lot. At the same time, guys like Jim Morrison were praised for causing chaos and damage. People not only accepted Morrison's crazy way of life, they even romanticized it. People thought he was creative and called him a genius because he was so careless. People thought Morrison was smart even when he drank too much, broke the rules, or was cruel. Because he was famous and important, people forgot about his mistakes. People had very different ideas about Janis's problems, though. When she drank or used harmful substance to deal with her pain, people called her unbalanced or self-destructive. People often thought less of her skills because of the criticism she got. People liked Morrison's flaws, but they looked down on Janis's. That society valued men's freedom to be flawed, but punished women for the same. This double standard was always a fight for her. Morrison's acts, especially the way he treated Janis badly, stood for everything she was fighting against. He stood for a society where men controlled and scared other people to stay in power. He was a clear example of male power because he could be violent without getting in trouble. Janis saw Morrison as more than just a dangerous person. She saw him as a sign of a system that let men control women and let bad behavior go unpunished. Janice hated Morrison because she was hurt by him and because she understood him better. In her mind, he was part of a society that shut down women's voices and praised men for being wild. Her refusal to obey him was part of a bigger fight for fair treatment, respect, and the freedom to be herself without fear. Janice had a hard time with this. When women stood up to sexism, they faced even more criticism and were left out. She wouldn't give up, though. Her music carried the hurt and anger of these fights, and her singing was a strong way to fight back. Every sound she made, every scream, was a protest against the unfair world she lived in. However, her stubbornness earned her fame, but also caused her great pain. Janice had to deal with the hard truths of a world that praised killing men like Morrison and looked down on her for making it through. This painful truth made her hate him. Morrison was the face of a bad system that hurt her and many others. Figuring out Janice's pushback helps us understand why she wouldn't forget or forgive Morrison for what he did. She wasn't just leaving one night or fight. She was leaving a culture that made it twice as hard for her to be heard and appreciated. Janice's story is a strong warning that every act of defiance is part of a bigger fight for justice and honor. She didn't hate Morrison out of spite. She didn't want to accept unfairness. They were speaking out against the injustice that let some people get rich by being mean, while others had to suffer for telling the truth. Rewriting the stories of Janice and Jim. Janis Joplin's anger towards Jim Morrison didn't go away after one fight or one night. It changed her life and how she dealt with people, both at work and in her personal life. That rejection wasn't just about a man, it was about a bigger refusal to accept the violence and disrespect that Morrison stood for. This refusal shaped many of Janice's decisions after they fought. It made Janice even more eager to go her own way. She was very careful about the people she dated, didn't work with Morrison or anyone in his group, and fought hard to keep her own space in the music world. Her anger wasn't just hate, it was a wall. It kept her from going back to a bad situation and pushed her to find her own voice in her own way. Morrison's reputation grew until he was almost like a mythical figure in rock history. Janice's story, on the other hand, stayed more real, raw, and deeply human. People saw Jim Morrison as the Lizard King, a rebellious poet whose difficult life and early death made him famous. He was famous for being very creative and wild, but his violence and abuse were often hidden behind those things. People in the music business liked the story better than the messy truth. On the other hand, Janice was known for making honest, emotional music that didn't try to hide her pain or battle. She wasn't smooth or perfect, and she didn't fit into the rock star stories that people wanted to tell. Instead, she sang about losing a loved one, being turned down, and the hard things that happened in her life. She was brave and open, and she spoke up for people who felt forgotten or misunderstood. They left behind different things, which are important. Morrison's story was praised, but many of the bad things he did were ignored or given excuses for. People sometimes forgot about Janice's story because it made people think about easy ideas they had about women and power. People are starting to think again about these stories now that new facts have come to light. It is impossible to separate Morrison's abuse and power over women, including Janice, from his music or fame. Realizing this makes us think carefully about how people remember him. The society that used to praise his bad behavior now wants him to take responsibility. It asks if we can still honor someone whose acts hurt real people. When you honor Janice's truth, you acknowledge the pain she went through and the strength she showed by standing up to Morrison and the society that let him act that way. It means honoring her not only for her skills, but also for not letting anyone shut her up or control her. Janice's life shows that having power without respect and kindness is dangerous. When you look at their lives together, you can see the darker side of rock and roll, the costs of the music and the human toll that the legends hide, and it shows how fame can help abusers and hurt victims. It also shows how important it is to listen to people who speak out. Janice's hate for Morrison isn't just a personal anger. It's a sign of standing up to injustice. It makes us think about why certain stories are told and which ones are told. It makes us remember those who fought back, even when most people would rather forget. The toxic environment of the 1960s music scene. There were harmful substance and drink everywhere in the music scene of the 1960s. It was a wild, unpredictable place. Addiction wasn't just a normal part of life for Janis Joplin and Jim Morrison. It was a way for them to deal with, survive, and sometimes get away from the intense stresses in their lives. But the world viewed and treated them in very different ways, even though they were going through the same problems. In one, what was praised or excused was shamed and criticized in the other. This shows that there are deep-seated gender and power-based double standards. Janis Joplin's drugs was a big part of both her songs and her life. She didn't drink or do harmful substance because she wanted to, but because she needed to dull the pain of feeling rejected, confused, and alone all her life. Her struggles with being alone and feeling unsafe gave her speech a raw honesty that touched millions of people. Many people looked down on her because she used harmful substances, though. People didn't praise her skills. Instead, they focused on her problems and called her crazy or self-destructive. A lot of people saw her problem as a sign that she couldn't control herself and a failure. Even though Janis's music was strong and real, some people saw her as a tragic figure who was fighting her problems but losing. On the other hand, Jim Morrison's crazy behavior was shrouded in mystery. People saw his heavy drinking and drugs as signs of his rebellious talent, not as signs that he was in trouble. The world saw his chaos as beautiful and celebrated it as part of the image of the tortured rock singer. People often let Morrison's actions slide because he was a man, a star, and a supposed genius. This was true in his songs, on stage, and in his personal life. People thought that his mistakes and violent acts were just the price of being creative. This unfair treatment of women showed how powerful fame and gender roles can be. Morrison was allowed to act carelessly, and was even praised for it. But Janis's problems were used to make her look bad and push her to the edges of society. The unfair treatment of some people had its roots in the bad society of the 1960s rock scene. They lived in a world that praised a male identity that was rough, dominating, and often mean. On and off stage, men were told to take chances, break the rules, and show they were in charge. People in this society thought that being violent or abusive was part of the lifestyle, or rock and roll excess. Male artists like Morrison were free to do dangerous things without much consequence. This place was dangerous for people like Janis. They were told to put up with men's bad behavior and back their wildness while keeping their own pain hidden. When women fought back or showed weakness, they were often criticized and rejected. The society that praised Morrison's carelessness also shamed Janis for being honest and strong. A lot of women felt helpless, alone, and stifled because of it. This bad setting affected how Janis and Jim felt about each other. Morrison's arrogance and sense of entitlement were perfect for the rules of his society. Because Janis wouldn't put up with that behavior, she was a threat to the way things were. Their fight wasn't just between two people. One wanted men to be in charge, and the other wanted respect and equality for everyone. Knowing about this dangerous culture helps us understand why Janice hated Morrison so much and why her fight was so important. She wasn't only mad at him for what he did to her, she was also against a system that let abuse happen and ignored victims. Her refusal to give in was a stand for fairness and honor. Their battles with addiction also show how badly people judged them. Folks thought that Janice's drink use meant she was failing, but they thought Morrison's use meant she was smart. This shows how gender affected how people saw and treated each other. Morrison saw his use as a badge of honor, while Janice saw it as a burden. This truth shaped Janice's music, which is full of pain, raw emotion, and resistance. Some of these contrasts can be found in Morrison's work too: light and dark, creativity and violence. Their story is more than just rock history. It teaches important lessons about how abusers can be protected by society and how bravery is needed to stand up to wrongdoing. Janice's fight with Morrison was also a fight against a society that let men like Morrison hurt people without getting in trouble for it. Her bravery is an example for people who are still going through hard times. These facts force Morrison's legend to face them, and they tell us that fame and talent do not make abuse okay. Next, we'll look at how Janice's action of breaking the bottle wasn't just a moment of self-defense, but also a strong sign of resistance. It was a clear stand against violence and control that showed how much she wanted respect and freedom. Janice's Bottle as an act of defiance. It was more than just a crazy party moment when Janis Joplin smashed that bottle over Jim Morrison's head. In a clear and strong act of defiance, she made it clear that she would not be hurt, controlled, or scared. A lot of the time, women had to put up with abuse in silence, but Janice's angry response showed that this would not be tolerated. That bottle wasn't just made of glass. It stood for Janice's refusal to put up with abuse. Along with her rough appearance, it showed how strong she was and how brave she was to speak out for herself when others might have kept quiet. Morrison and everyone else watching got a message from this. Janice would not let anyone put her down or treat her badly. People talked about this event in whispers for decades, thinking it was just rock and roll drama or the result of too much drinking. However, new information has helped us better understand how important that moment really was. The stories told by Janice's friends, other witnesses, and Morrison's ex-partners have shown that the story was not true. Morrison's actions were part of a disturbing pattern of violence and control. Because of this, Janice's action of breaking the bottle becomes a sign of strength, survival, and defiance against a harmful society that let abusers like Morrison get away with it. It's not enough to just remember an exciting fight to honor Janice's bravery. In a time when women were often ignored or blamed when they spoke out against abuse, it means recognizing how brave it was to fight back. When Janice did what she did, she refused to be a victim and asked to be treated with respect and honor. It makes us think about her memory in a new way, not just as a crazy, troubled singer, but as a woman who stood up for what was right. At the same time, this event makes us think again about Jim Morrison's impact. No longer can the story of the tortured genius hide the darker sides of what he did. It's not complete or fair to praise his music without also recognizing the harm he did to those closest to him. To be accountable, Morrison had to admit that he was both a great artist and a man whose violent behavior had real effects. The way Janice smashed the bottle is a powerful warning that courage often shows up when you least expect it. We should honor people who stand up to harm and demand a society where abuse is never okay. Even though it hurts, their story makes us want to find the truth, do what's right, and treat everyone with respect. especially those who have been silent. Janis Joplin's fearless act continues to inspire generations of women to speak out against abuse and oppression. Her boldness reminds us that standing up to violence takes immense courage, especially in times and places where silence was often the easier path. Beyond the rock and roll mythos, Janis's story is a testament to resilience and self-respect in the face of adversity. It challenges us to look deeper into the lives of cultural icons and question the narratives we've been told. Moreover, Janis's defiance shines a light on the broader struggle for women's rights and safety, a fight that remains urgent today. Her legacy calls on us to create spaces where victims are heard, supported, and empowered. In remembering that shattering moment, we honor not just a legendary artist, but a warrior who refused to be broken, and whose voice still echoes, demanding justice and change. Outro. Thanks for watching. If you found this story powerful and eye-opening, please like, share, and subscribe for more untold music truths. Don't forget to click the next video popping up on your screen. See you there.